So calling to order the meeting of the Hubbardston Planning Board. Planning Board meetings are broadcast live and digitally recorded. You are consenting to that by being in this room. This meeting is being held in person and virtually through Zoom pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which allows public meetings to be conducted remotely so that board and committee members, as well as members of the public, can participate remotely. Recognizing that we have a quorum of regular members in the room and we have our alternate member present. First item, which actually is from the, oh, nope, it's there. Sorry, it just had a slash mark. Any public comments for anything that is not on the agenda later on? So this would be public comments on anything not on the agenda. Anything from the board? All right, well, moving forward, introduction to our new associate member, Peter Russell. Peter, can you just say a couple words about your background and welcome to the board?
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be the associate member. Most recently, I was a member of the Hubbardston Finance Committee for the last 3 years. I've lived in Hubbardston part-time since 2004 on Streeter Road. I moved here full-time in 2015 from Charlton, where we lived for 30 years. I'm originally from Webster, Mass. I attended the University of Massachusetts in Amherst in 1980, graduated with a bachelor's degree. I worked in the banking industry for 40 years, most recently for 25 years as Senior Vice President at Athol Savings Bank in commercial real estate and residential construction lending. Beyond that, I'm also the president of the Lovewell Pond Sporting Club Incorporated here in Hubbardston. I've been the president for about 15 years and married to a wonderful woman for 42 years, Donna, my wife, and I've got three full-age kids with 2 grandkids and 5 dogs and a cat. And I have a kennel license.
Well,
issued by this board years ago.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for your previous service, and thank you for your willingness to serve the town in the future in what is a fairly challenging unpaid job. So we very much appreciate you being here and welcome you, and are excited about your background and what you're going to bring to the board for us.
Thank you.
All right, next on the list is minutes for approval. We have 2 sets of minutes that are up. One is November 4th, 2021. I'd like to take them separately, especially since they're not opening on my computer yet. So do we have any questions or comments about the November? I guess before we move on, just to give some background to the public, because not to assume everybody is an expert on how planning boards operate. The associate member is a member of the planning board that votes for the purpose of just special permits. They're here, and by culture on our board, they participate in all the meetings. But the only place where they have a right to vote under our bylaws is for special permits. But they're a very important member of the board, because as you can see, we're missing a member tonight, so having an alternate member here to work with us on the special permit we have later on is a big deal. So thank you very much. You're allowing us to move forward. Going back to the minutes for approval, a little bit of background on that. We're catching up on some minutes from COVID. That's why we have some minutes that are still hanging out there from 2021. So with that said, does anybody have any questions or comments on the minutes? Otherwise, let's have a motion.
I'd like to present a motion that we accept the minutes for November 4th, 2021.
Okay, here in a first, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Here in a first and a second, how about some discussion?
None. I checked them, and I mean,
you always have a couple of corrections.
there are little some minor corrections that I've already made into the minutes, and various spelling issues, and so they're noted.
Okay, so would you like to amend your motion to be approved the minutes as presented in the drive?
As previously amended and as presented in the drive, yes.
Okay, and the second, you're happy with that
I'll
friendly
second
amendment?
it again, yeah.
All right, any further discussion from there? Then let's have a vote, and this is a regular member vote.
Steiger, aye.
Dak, aye.
And the chair is aye, those minutes are accepted. Do we have any members that are appearing online? My Zoom is not loaded yet.
No.
Okay. So next on the list is April 5th, 2023 for acceptance. Do we have a motion to approve those?
I would like to forward a motion that we approve the minutes of April 5th, 2023, as they are presented
Excellent, thank you.
in the drive.
And do we have a second?
I will second.
All right, any discussion or additional amendments for those before acceptance? Excuse me for misspeaking on that. All right, well, let's have the vote.
Steiger, aye.
Dak, aye.
And Monroe, aye. So moving on to new business, we have Royal Sun Farms, Damon Schmidt. Do we have a representative for Damon Schmidt?
Doesn't look like he's present.
That is really unlikely to miss a meeting. Did you get any correspondence from him?
Minimal. I mean, it's what he sent in a month ago, the email and the sketch map. You guys could discuss it, but I think it's gonna be difficult without him to present.
Yeah, I guess I don't wanna go too far into it without having him present, but the gist of it is, he's looking to add bathrooms, and he's seeking a modification of the special permit as a minor engineering change. So, really, I would like him to walk us through those changes so we could first determine whether or not it's a minor engineering change. And then if it is a minor engineering change, we would then be on to potentially approve it. But that's tough to do without him here to present to us. So unless anybody really wants to discuss it now, I suggest we table it and move on.
I would like to suggest that we table this here.
Okay. So next on the list is an A&R application for D2 Builders. Do we have representatives here for that?
It's not.
Well, we have plans.
We do have plans. They're pretty straightforward. You could probably review them if you wanted.
Yes.
The application.
Anybody else like to see the paper copy of the application?
I think I saw this here, yep, that's the one I saw.
So the existing lot is this right here.
I saw it.
With 500, roughly 600 feet of frontage in the existing lot. They're carving this 2.7 acre lot out of it with 275 feet of frontage. It does have a wetland section in it, but the back of the lot and the front of the lot are upland.
Okay, should we just go through the list?
Yeah, while we're pulling up the list, Mark, did you examine this plan in context of the list of approval criteria in our subdivision control rules?
Yeah.
And what was the conclusion of your review? Was there anything that was missing?
No.
All right, and just for the benefit of the public, we have guidelines that we use for approving A&Rs. And A&R meaning approval not required, which is, I know, a little confusing because we're approving something that is approval not required, but the approval that is not required is subdivision approval. But yet the rules for looking at them is still in our subdivision control regulations, so bear with me on that. So we have a set of criteria that we look at against them. And we're just trying to get a copy of that criteria handy with the IT issues. All right, so first criteria, property boundaries with a North Point date and scale.
See that?
Yep. Name of the record owner, name of the registered land surveyor, and the Worcester Registry of Deeds book and page reference.
Right there.
Yep. Area of each lot,
Yes, they indicate the acreage.
sufficient data to determine the location, direction, and length of every street and way line.
The streets are, I believe, only Ragged Hill Road, and there is clear definition in terms of the public way, the width, and all of the information, yep.
Okay, where practical, boundary lines of contiguous and adjacent land and the names of the owners thereof as determined from the most recent tax list.
We do have three, on the boundaries, yes. And
Okay.
Barry Brown, Samuel Shannon Stratton, and James and John Fletcher, trustees.
And location of
Sorry,
all.
4 of them, there's an additional one, there's a Jeffrey Young.
Okay. And location
last
of
one.
all permanent monuments properly identified?
Don't see any, I mean, maybe I'm,
Yeah, to some degree, we just have to trust
Yeah.
that the professional surveyors did that.
has done that, yes.
Location, names, and present widths of non-public and private ways abutting the property.
There are none.
Suitable space to record the endorsement of the board that approval is not required, and the signatures of the member of the board.
There are locations for it.
Excellent. Zoning, classification, and location of any zoning district boundaries that may lie within the locus of the plan.
Zoning district, yes, RA, residential, agricultural.
Okay, in the case of the creation of a new lot, the remaining land area, frontage of the land, and ownership of the applicant shall be shown.
It does indicate the lot size, and I'm assuming here that because this lot is still by the same owner, that it does go by the same owner, which is,
Okay, location of all existing buildings, including setback and scale.
I'm sorry, say again?
Location of existing buildings, including setback.
There is no building. There are no buildings.
And there's no buildings on those lots, okay. Location and area of any wetlands on the lots being created by the plan, including the lot being created by the remaining land. In lieu of delineating the wetlands on the remaining land, the applicant may provide a written certification from the surveyor or professional engineer who prepared the plan that the remaining parcel of land contains the minimum required upland area required by the zoning bylaws.
The wetlands are indicated on the plot plan.
Okay. And that is the end of the checklist. Does anybody on the board have any particular concerns about these plans? Is any member of the public here to speak as to these plans?
No.
All right, can I get a motion?
Wanna go about Erica?
No, you can't.
So I'd like to put a motion that we go ahead and take this A&R and I guess we sign it and approve it as
Approve it as presented.
presented,
Yep.
yes.
All right.
Only 3 signatures, obviously.
Approve it as not approved.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it's
know.
an approval of not approval.
Not
Welcome to
required.
Massachusetts.
As not required.
Of an A&R.
All right,
Okay.
here in a first and a second.
I will second.
Here in a first and a second. Any further discussion? All right, calling a vote.
Schneider, aye?
Dak, aye.
Monroe, aye.
We decided that.
The A&R is accepted, so we need to sign it. Do we have the requisite Sharpie?
All right. Let me just come around.
And you have the signature copies.
Thank you.
on you. Oh, don't do that.
That's a two-ended Sharpie. All right, so moving down the list, we have another A&R. A&R application, Wind Ridge Holdings, Mr. Rowe. Do you have anybody here to speak to these?
President accounted for.
Excellent, well, welcome back. And can you please tell us about the A&R you submitted?
Here's the Form A, feasibility.
I have a copy of it here, but thank you.
Yeah, did they just do Ragged? I'm sorry, I thought the meeting started at 7 today.
Now, basically what we have now on the tax map are 3 parcels.
Oh, you're here for that one.
Yeah.
This lot
That was the
and these
one
2
I
lots
just signed.
together.
Okay, very good.
Pardon me.
Sorry.
Can you start again, please? I apologize. Go ahead.
Can we just pause for a moment? So you're here for the first A&R?
Correct.
Okay, we ran down the list and we just signed it, so.
Okay. That's very good.
We're on to our second one, so.
Okay.
What's that?
Please go ahead.
No problem. All right, so basically on the tax map right now, there are 3 parcels. It's this parcel here and these 2 parcels here. This is the residual property from the Halfrey property, which encompassed at one point most of Halfrey Road. And over the years, they sold off many parcels of land, including all the abutting property and these lots here. And this is remaining land. There was no real legal description for it, so to clean it up, we decided to create these 2 parcels, so we have a legal description to be able to convey the properties.
The 2 parcels are the ones, as you described here, lot 1 and lot 2?
Yes. They have different mapping parcel numbers, but we're calling them lot 1 and lot 2 on this plan.
Okay, so parcel 2 is made up of parcel 10-23 and 10-32?
Yes. I think this is 10-24, something like that.
Okay.
And this is, you came to talk to us about one that had easement on it before, this is a different one, if I
Correct.
remember correctly, okay. All right, anybody have any questions on the board before we run down the list? All right, so property boundaries, North Point, date and scale.
North Point.
Yep,
We have
scale
the date
to the bottom.
and, scale is in.
Name of the record owner, name of the registered land surveyor, and the Worcester Registry of Deeds book and page reference.
So we do have the surveyor. This is you, right?
That's Alfred Berry, it's a surveyor. Yeah, this is
What's your name? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay, so, area of each lot.
So 655 and 782. And again, just to confirm, these 2, this is why these are pointed to that, this is the totality of these 2 parcels, right?
Yes.
Sufficient data to determine the location, direction, and length of every street, way line, lot line, boundary line, monuments, or references necessary to establish these lines on the ground.
They do appear to be on here.
Where practical, boundary lines of contiguous and adjacent land and the names of the, excuse me, owners thereof, as determined by the most recent tax list.
We do see those, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we do see Mark
Okay.
Psika, Roger Cohen, Mike Mygard, Stephen Janice Sullivan, and Lee Brady, okay?
Okay. And location of all permanent monuments properly identified.
I believe they are, I'm looking at them,
There's several pins.
several pins, yeah, they're all in there.
There's stone wall
Highway
right there.
markers
Stone
along
wall,
Worcester Road as
yeah.
well.
Location, names, and present widths of non-public private ways abutting the property.
There are none.
Suitable space to record the endorsement of the board, that approval is not required, and that the signatures of members of the board.
They are up on the top right.
Zoning classification and location of any zoning district boundaries that lie within.
None.
In the case of the creation of a new lot, which this is not. Oh, well, it's the merger. The remaining land area and frontage of the land and the ownership of the applicant shall be shown. Location of all existing buildings, including setback and side and yard designations,
There are no buildings here.
and there are no buildings on the property.
Correct, no buildings.
Location of all, I already did that, location and area of any wetlands on the lots being created by the plan, including the lot being created by the remaining land. In lieu of delineating the wetlands on the remaining land, the applicant may provide written certification from the surveyor or professional engineer who prepared the plan that the remaining parcel of land contains the minimum required upland area required by the zoning bylaws.
It does, and there's no indication of any wetlands on the plan itself.
Okay, to the best of your knowledge, there's no.
There are
wetlands.
wetlands, but we had a statement instead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
So this is what
it's-
you're saying here, lot 1 and 2 shown here all contain minimum required upland of
Mhm.
40,000 square feet as specified in the town of Hubbardston. But there's no affirmation that there are wetlands, right?
Correct, that's in lieu of having
Oh, in lieu
delineated
of
on
having
the
it,
plan.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the criteria. Does anybody have any questions about meeting the criteria? All right, so then we need a motion that approval is not required and that the board will endorse the plan.
Erica, would you like to do
that?
I know
You
you're,
can.
Erica, I'm giving you the opportunity, but that's okay, I'll do it.
I'll pass.
Good. At this point in time, I'd like to present a motion that we accept this A&R and that we accept it as presented in the plot plan that has been put forth to us as an A&R.
Here in a first, do we have a second?
I will second.
Any further discussion? Calling a vote.
Steiger, aye?
Dak, aye.
Monroe, aye.
This goes back, I guess.
All right, so we need to form the line with Sharpie.
Thank you.
Did you get the PDF I sent?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a point of information for the board ourselves here. I do recall that we had submitted our signatures.
To the registry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Erica, being an associate, was also included in that?
Yeah,
She was on.
Just wanna make sure.
Yep.
Can't believe my signature's the one that they sometimes come back and say that they don't have defense.
You're an attorney.
I know, but like, just looking at the signatures on the plan, like mine's the most consistent.
So you think.
I mean, I do.
So you think, you believe that.
All right, so, and nobody showed up for Royal Sun Farms.
I think we should just give it.
Yeah, all right, so give Mark a chance to get settled and then we'll move on to the public hearing portion.
For review.
Hi, folks.
Thanks for coming in, have a good evening.
I know.
My computer's just getting into the Google Drive.
Okay.
All right, so moving along the agenda, we're on to our main event for the evening, which is a public hearing. Notice was given that the Hubbardston Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, May 18th at 6:30 PM in Slade Building, 7A Main Street, Hubbardston, regarding a special permit application for the construction of a 145-foot communications tower filed by Industrial Tower Wireless LLC. The property is located at Accessor Map 3, Lot 189, behind 243 Gardner Road. plans have been viewable at the town clerk's office during regular business hours and have been posted on the website. We have advertised this public hearing in the Gardner News on 5/3/2023 and 5/10/2023. This is the first night of having the public hearing, so we're gonna be opening it for the first time. And do I declare this open or do I call for a motion?
You need to call for a motion.
So I'm gonna call for a motion to open the public hearing.
I'd like to put forth a motion that we open the public hearing to discuss the tower and, the Industrial Tower and Wireless LLC.
And here in a first, we have a second, and Peter, you are voting for
Second.
this. And we have a second. Hearing a first and second, let's have a vote.
Steiger, aye?
Jack, aye.
Russell, aye.
And Monroe, aye. All right, so we have a plan on how we want to approach this. The way we're gonna do it is we're gonna have the applicant present, and then after the applicant presents, we're gonna do a call for public comment, if there's anybody here to speak on it. Then we are going to have the board ask some questions, and we're gonna take it from there. Just so everybody has a realistic expectation, this is likely gonna end up being continued out because there's a bunch of other steps that the applicant needs to complete. And I just noticed that Bill is not here.
Bill Murray?
Yeah. Bill was supposed to be here tonight.
Was he invited?
Yeah.
I'm assuming?
Yeah, he'd emailed us to ask about it.
Okay.
We definitely had said yes. And I guess for background, Bill Murray is the town's consultant and will be performing the detailed review of the application. Also, we need to do a vote to determine that the application is complete. Where did I put the outline? So I guess first on the list is we need to actually determine the application to be complete.
Is it not working?
Mark's currently working with an IT issue, but as a matter of background, we had a meeting a couple cycles ago where we reviewed the application. We determined that there was information missing in order for the application to be considered complete, and the applicant responded back to the planning board with that information. This is just accepting the application to move forward with the process. Mark, as our land use clerk, has reviewed the application and the information that was submitted, and Mark, is it your opinion that the application is complete at this point?
Yes.
All right, so with that being said, we need to have a vote to determine the application complete. Somebody like to make a motion? Or does anybody have any questions about it?
May I suggest the following? We did have some open items that still have to be reviewed. Can we just go through every single one of them and validate that they are indeed complete, and just focus on those that were last time determined as not being complete?
Sure, we can do that. Let's just get to this. All right, so at our meeting, we determined that there were some items that were missing. The first one was item 1. Which was an item about drainage. I was just determining whether or not we need to read the specific references into the record. But it was the application states, the site plan incorporates substantial stormwater runoffs and drainage plans, and we determined that no drainage plans were submitted, and that the application should include drainage plans. can you just tell us about what we received back on that?
We have a new set of plans that showed drainage features, including some check dams on the drainage swales going down the side of the driveway. It's not gonna be in your presentation, talking about that at all, or do we need to trot out the plans here?
We can talk about it. It wasn't part of the presentation, but if there are specific questions, we can certainly answer them.
Okay.
Yeah, can you just tell us briefly about the supplement that you sent over?
Sure, we sent revised plans with the drainage. I know that my, proposals.
Yeah, they were. You can see that, we also asked for a detailed sheet of a larger scale, and that was incorporated in. The drainage swale was added here, but the more detailed sheet that you asked for, the 1 inch equals 10 feet, I think
Yeah.
it was. You can see here the drainage swale within this, it's less than 100 feet.
So that would take
And the
care of
grass
item number
filter
one?
strip.
Yep, yeah, it's item number 1, and it's actually number 2 also. Because it was bylaw requires site detailed plan at a scale of 1 to 10, which was just demonstrated to us. Item 3 was application states that the proposed tower will only be lit if required by the FAA. The application should include unofficial results of a tower air screening along with a narrative describing the likely implications of fail slope result based on the applicant's professional experience in similar situations. Just tell us about the information you provided on that.
Sure, so I was planning on going through the presentation and discussing that then. Would you like me to discuss it now, or?
If you don't mind, just to make
Sure.
sure that we have, because
Sure.
we're trying to look for completeness at this point in time.
Yep, I didn't see that as something in the requirements, though, that it had to have a slope test. But either way, we did one, and it was because we're a mile away from the Gardner Airport, notification to the FAA is required, and that's been filed.
Okay. Any further questions on that from the board? Next completeness item that we sent was equipment specification should include the size of proposed propane tank and anticipated runtime for the emergency generator. Can you tell us a little bit about the update on that?
Yep, so we are not proposing a generator at this time, so there's no generator specs or propane specs for the site.
So this is going to be powered with electricity that comes from the grid. If the grid goes down, you are down.
We have battery backup.
Oh, you have battery backup?
Yeah.
And what is the battery backup's life?
It's typically 7 to 8 hours.
And we'll have more substantive discussion on that later,
Right.
but just for the
Yeah.
purpose of completion. Application proposes, given that the proposed communications facility will be set back from the road and due to significant vegetation on the lot, the applicant suggests that no additional landscaping is required. We asked for additional detail concerning the distance from viewing points and likely sight lines to be provided to support the suggestion.
Yeah.
I
So-
assume you're gonna be prepared to talk about that tonight.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, and we wanted to incorporate that as during the balloon test, we'll have plenty of photos to show the before and after and the sight lines and that stuff too. We just need to schedule it.
Okay. And application, any questions on that item from the
No,
board?
that's fine.
And item 7, application states that the applicant agrees to provide a bond in the form of a reasonably similar to the form accompanying this application. Did I read that right? The proposal is unclear and needs to be clarified, the bond requirements.
So we brought a sample bond that we've used in the past. I don't, right back to you. You'd most like to
These
take
are
a
all
look
really
at it.
discussion items, not
Yeah,
completeness items.
and I think that's gonna go into substantive discussion, because I think we actually have had to do a waiver for that in the past, we had to do. But you do have it, that's
yeah.
that's
Okay,
ultimately
that's
what
good.
we need.
Great.
Okay. All right, does the board have any questions about the items that we asked, whether they're present for completeness?
No, I think you have covered each one of them, and it's now for us to determine based on what you have presented, whether or not there's anything else that needs to be satisfied.
Yeah. I feel like we have what we need to start a substantive discussion
I
on it.
believe so too.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion? That we accept the plans as complete?
We can, yes, and so I'd like to present a motion that we accept the plans as presented as being complete, and for us to proceed with the plans as they have been put forth by the applicant.
Sorry, I should have asked for the special permit application.
Special
as
permit
complete.
application, you're right, thank you.
This is what happens when you have these at the end of the day.
Yep.
All right, hearing a first, do we have a second?
I will second.
Hearing a first and a second, let's have a vote.
Steiger, aye?
Dak, aye.
Russell, aye.
And Monroe, aye. So we have determined the application to be complete, so we can have a substantive discussion about this. I would like to just pause for a moment, Mr. Schmidt. I know there might have been some confusion because we had our last meeting published at 7.
Oh, I was late.
Yeah, this is gonna take a while, so I don't know if you wanna hang around, grab
No,
coffee,
I'll
get
come
scheduled
back.
for another day. This
What,
is,
the next meeting on the sixth?
we have the town meeting
7th,
coming.
the Wednesday, the day after town meeting.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Right,
So do you want to
thank
be on the agenda for that meeting?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave.
Okay.
Okay.
Have a good one. Thank you
too.
very much.
Take care. So, okay, back to our list on this. We will now have the presentation by the applicant.
Would you like me to sit up here or stay here?
Whatever is more comfortable for you. The cameras that broadcast the TV are there. We did get that up there
Yeah.
for in the room, excellent.
Okay.
So, feel free to join us at the table.
Okay. Hello.
And please just introduce yourself for
Yes,
the
my
record.
name is Shayna Gallinat. I am a consultant working with Industrial Tower and Wireless on their permitting and site acquisition. And with me this evening are Kevin Delaney, he's the Engineering and Regulatory Compliance Manager, Rick Bosi, our CAD Supervisor, and Kevin Fadden, Site Acquisition Specialist. We are here tonight seeking a special permit to construct a 145-foot lattice tower off of Gardner Road in the Residential Agricultural District. While the property is not located in the Wireless Communications Overlay District in Article 18, the use is allowed by special permit in residential districts according to Article 4, Section 4.2F as in Frank. That allows towers with a maximum height of 150 in residential districts by special permit. So that's why we're here before this board seeking a special permit. We did receive a denial letter from the building commissioner, which is a part of this application. We have requested a few waivers, which you've alluded to, and I'll happily discuss after Kevin's presentation, but I would turn it over to him now to walk you through site selection and the site.
Okay, thank you.
Is it okay if I stand by the TV to
However
point
you're
to
at.
certain things? Okay, great. Good evening, my name is Kevin Delaney. As mentioned, I'm the Engineering and Regulatory Compliance Manager for Industrial Tower and Wireless. I'm just gonna repeat a few things that Shayna mentioned, but we're proposing a 145-foot lattice-style tower located off of Gardner Road, which of course is also known as Route 68. The property is in the, control works here. There you go.
You wanna bring that into focus?
Is that, oh yeah, I guess that's not going out, so.
No.
There's nobody on the meeting anyway.
Okay, can you promote me to a panelist? Give a chance.
The property is located in the northern section of town. Again, it's map 3, lot 189, and it's within the residential agricultural district. It's located right where this star is here. And it's on a 5.3 acre lot. Access to the site utilizes an existing driveway. We have Gardner Road down here, Route 68, and the existing driveway access is this area right here. And that's approximately 485 feet in length. And at the end of the pavement, which is in this area right here, we will be constructing a gravel driveway, which is approximately from this point to the site compound is about 230 feet in length. And that's a 12-foot wide driveway, and it's cleared to 18 feet. The entire area of Gardner Road to the communications site this access area here to the site is within a 25-foot wide access and utility easement. There'll be a locked gate, which I'll show you a picture of in a few slides, in this area here, just beyond the paved driveway into the gravel driveway portion of the site. The site itself is a leased area of 100-foot by 100-foot area with the, within that 100-foot by 100-foot lease area, we propose to construct an 80-foot by 80-foot compound. There'll be a 14-foot gate to access the compound. And within the compound is, surrounding the compound, I should say, we're proposing an 8-foot high chain link fence. Now this circle that you see here on the plan that surrounds the site, that's what your regulations refer to as a fall zone. And the requirement for the town of Hubbardston for a fall zone is 110% of the height of the tower. So again, we're proposing a 145-foot tower, so that's 159.5 feet basically is what your fall zone requirement. And at the closest point, we're just a little over 160 feet.
Do you mind taking questions?
Sure.
And we had this here with the previous applicant for a tower. Is the absolute height of this tower going to be 145 feet? The reason I'm asking is because we had a previous applicant who also came in and said, I think it was 140 feet or 145 feet, but then they had an additional extension. It was sort of like a
lightning rod.
A lightning rod.
Now, the entire height of the tower with everything will not exceed 145 feet.
Including any lightning rods that you have.
Including
And
that,
does it
yes.
have a lightning rod?
It does not. We don't require a lightning rod on the
Okay,
tower.
thank you.
Yep. So there's also, at the beginning of the compound, there's a hammerhead turnaround for vehicles to be able to turn around, and that's 15 feet by 30 feet. And the tower is located in the center of the compound. A little delay on the turning the page here. Bear with me for a second. Okay, so this is a zoom-in area of the actual compound itself. So again, you can see it much clearer here. You have the tower, lattice tower proposed in the center of that 80-foot by 80-foot compound, and then the communication shelters that would be surrounding it. This is that turnaround area, and again, this is the gravel driveway access here. Now within the compound, it'll be 6 inches of 3/4 crushed stone. And there will be this squiggly line that you see surrounding the 100-foot by 100-foot lease area, as well as the access, that's the tree cutting line. So we're cutting the minimum amount of trees necessary in order to be constructed this site. Our next slide is just an example of one of our communication compounds, so you get an idea. Again, the tower's in the middle of the compound, and then the shelters along the side. As you can see, this is an 80-foot by 80-foot fenced-in compound with access, and the 100-foot by 100-foot area is what is leased. So as you can see, we cut the very minimum, only what we need to construct the site. So we try to conserve the trees to the greatest extent possible. And just for reference, again, the setback from the tower center to Gardner Road is approximately 750 feet. So it's a good distance from the main road. This slide here is just to give you a vertical profile of the tower and what it looks like. Again, just to show that it's a lattice tower with the antenna arrays on it. And these are just examples, again, of different lattice towers. Our next slides are what we call coverage studies, they're propagation maps. It's important to go over these because, you know, towers, they're not something that's chosen at random locations, but there's a lot of science and RF propagation frequencies require computer modeling to see exactly what they'll provide for coverage. So that's what we have here. This is a computer-generated coverage study program, and it takes into account key variables such as the terrain in the area, the vegetation, the site itself, the antenna heights, the ground elevations, the locations, the latitude and longitude. And the end result is a map like you have before you here. And just to explain these maps, the green line here is the town line. So of course we have Hubbardston, and our site is proposed on the north side of town here. The red lines are state roads. So of course we have Route 68, and then in Gardner we have Route 2 and Route 2A. The blue squares that you see here are the existing towers that are there today. Now, it also, this coverage map also includes approved towers. So this includes the approved tower that you have close to Town Hall here. And so the yellow area represents in-building penetration, and the blue area represents vehicle, if you were in a vehicle, the kind of coverage you would have. So our coverage gap that we're looking to provide coverage to is this white area here. So white area represents either no service or very unreliable service. If you were trying to make a phone call, you might have it for a little while, but you will likely drop it here. The gap encompasses in the town of Hubbardston, it's about 3 miles in length along Route 68, and it's about a mile or so into Gardner as well. So this is what it looks like today with existing sites and approved sites. And this is what our proposed site, which again is located right here, will do for that coverage gap. And as you can see, let's go back and forth, it covers the gap quite well. And then this next map just shows the standalone coverage from the site.
Can you go back to the previous map for a second? Can you explain how it is that you suddenly have a white zone surrounded by coverage? Is that because of a dip or?
This one here, you mean?
No, you go back towards, yeah, right there.
Yeah.
You see right next to Route 68?
Oh, here?
Yes.
It's gotta be a low spot, I'm not sure what's there physically.
Okay, so it's a low spot.
It's gotta be a dip or something. I see that there's a pond across here, so maybe this is a
Rieta
swamp.
Ranch.
That's Rieta Ranch?
A swamp area.
Okay. And then you have another one to the west of there. which
Yeah,
is also
typically
very
that's
small.
caused from just low elevation, yeah. And this again is just some examples of some sites that are similar to the one that we're proposing, lattice style towers in that compound.
Is there a reason that you're selecting lattice style towers?
Yeah, we find them, quite honestly, to be able to see through them, we feel like they're visually less intrusive than the monopole style towers. Monopole is just a giant steel piece that goes up, and we find that these are visually less intrusive. They're also easier to work on for the construction people to climb them. They're easier to work around. And again, this is an example of a typical compound layout. And this is the ground equipment with the tower in the middle and the fenced chain link. It's an 8-foot-high chain link fence. This was the gate that I was mentioning before, the proposed gate that we would have after you leave the pavement and get onto the gravel portion of the access. And that would be locked just to keep unauthorized vehicles from entering. And just as an example of signs that would typically, the only signs that would exist would be the ones that are on the compound itself, the gate, the 14-foot gate at the compound, as well as, again, back to the gate that's at the access, there's a small sign there. Just, it's required by the FCC, just basically to identify that we own the site. It gives our contact number if there's any issues, as well as our FCC registration number. And just a little bit about industrial tower and wireless. I mean, we've been in business for almost 50 years now. We're a little different from other companies that you may have dealt with in the past, whereas, you know, we do all our work in-house. So a lot of construction companies out there that build towers, they have subcontractors that come to the site and do a lot of the work. Industrial Tower and Wireless does everything in-house. So we have our own foundation crews, we have our own excavation crews, concrete crews. We also have our own electricians who do all the wiring to the sites, master electricians. This is just an example of some underground utilities that we have going to a site up in New Hampshire. We also have our own tower erectors and tower technicians. So nobody climbs our towers except for us. We don't allow it. So there's not a lot of different vans with different company names going in and out of the facility. It's gonna be an industrial truck that looks like this. And if there's ever any kind of reason that the town needs to get a hold of us about a concern, we're reachable, and it's always us at the site. So we take a lot of pride in the construction of our sites. We also do special projects. I mean, this obviously is nothing like we're proposing here, but this is a tower in West Bridgewater where we had put a 10,000-pound broadcast antenna at the top of it, and we needed a helicopter to do that. So our people have a lot of experience. We also have our own landscaping and maintenance crews. You know, The people that work for industrial, they work for the company for a long time. I personally have been there for 30 years. Rick Vosi has been there for 25 years now. Kevin Fadden's been here for 13 years. So we take a lot of pride in our work, and we're here to stay. We're here to be a good neighbor and work with the town. So we appreciate you allowing us to be able to present this to you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
What's the closest towns that you have towers in here?
Royalston, we have a tower in Royalston. We have a tower in Rutland. 2 towers in Rutland, actually.
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Okay. And how many carriers can you support with the proposed tower?
This is capable of supporting 5 carriers.
5 carriers?
5 carriers, yeah. So it's
Okay.
the maximum that the tower would be able to.
And all of these carriers would have exactly the same coverage as you presented on your coverage map?
They'd have very similar coverage, so depending on where they're mounted on the tower, where they are on the neighboring towers, it could change slightly, but it's typically gonna be.
What is slightly?
Well, if a carrier is on the top of a 190-foot tower 4 miles away, but the other carrier is at, say, 100 feet at the same tower, they're not gonna have quite as good coverage, because
Are we
obviously.
talking feet, or are we talking miles? That's where I'm
Not
at.
talking miles, but you could be talking tenths of miles or half a mile, depending on the carrier.
Okay. Coverage is a big issue for the town of Hubbardston, and we have had a lot of concerns and complaints about individuals who say they have poor cell tower. That area is notorious for poor cell tower.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important for us to understand the potential benefits that somebody like your project can provide and present. And so I understand technology is not the same depending on, I mean, the technology will be the same, but the way that you install it will have a difference in terms of the ranges overall. But it's important for them to know that you will have pretty much very similar ranges across the multiple carriers that you are utilizing here for.
Right. You know, some of the variables that I mentioned is height on the tower. Another variable is the frequency that the carrier operates.
Understand?
So your Verizon and your AT&Ts who have been around since the beginning, different names, but Verizon and AT&T, they have cellular licenses, A-band and B-band. Those
Yep.
frequencies operate at 800 megahertz.
Yep.
The lower the frequency, the farther out it propagates. The higher the frequency, the less distance it propagates. So those same carriers also have high frequencies as well. So depending on what they're using in the area, it could adjust accordingly. But the frequencies that are presented to you today are the middle frequencies. So if they're operating at lower frequencies, the coverage is gonna be a little better. If they're operating at higher frequencies, it's gonna be a little worse.
A project like this here, what's your timeline, projected timeline from start to finish?
Once we receive all our approvals and
Right.
like the actual construction process,
Yeah.
is that what you're asking? So typically, once we receive our special permit, which hopefully we do, we would have to get our stamped documents for the tower itself, so it would require borings to be done at the site to see the geological ground and exactly what kind of foundation is needed. That process takes about 30 to 60 days. And then once we actually start breaking ground, you know, you're talking probably between 3 to 4 months
Okay.
from
And
start to finish.
and understanding there's a process that we have to follow with completion, it's still uncertain,
Of
it's
course.
still to be determined. What's your projection for this year, in terms, are we talking 2023, 2024?
We would like to get in by the fall of 2023 if possible.
So that's your projection?
Yeah.
Okay, want to understand that. I don't wanna hog the,
Additional questions from the
I'll
board?
have some other ones later on.
I'm good right now.
I'm good right now.
Okay, I'm also good for the moment.
I do have some questions, sorry.
Yeah.
Briefly, this is the battery one. I do wanna understand, can you explain the technology with regards to the battery and how that is put together?
So that's
What-
just-
What do you have there?
That's for our internal system, for our radio system.
Yep.
Now, if Verizon or AT&T, when they come to co-locate, they're likely going to want a generator here for their communications equipment, because that's usually what they use for backup. But for what we're proposing right now, we're just talking about battery backup.
What type of batteries is what I'm going to? Are we talking about lead acid
No,
batteries?
like lithium type batteries.
Okay, and how many are we talking about, and how big are these here? I'm asking because from a safety perspective, we have just undergone in the town of Hubbardston a bylaw for large battery energy storage systems. And I know this is not what you're doing here, but the fire department has been involved, and although they have understanding and knowledge, I definitely would like to understand what kind of lithium batteries you are proposing on bringing here, and how big they are,
Yeah.
volumetric and things of that nature.
It's probably about 6 batteries. They're lithium. They're smaller than a car battery, an AGM type style battery.
Gotcha.
And they go basically at the bottom of the equipment cabinet.
Do you have any idea of the wattage?
I don't know if I could get you that information, but I don't know.
Is this technology one that, can you tell us how long this technology for the battery has been utilized, and where, has it been utilized with any issues and concerns that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, we've been using it for years. There's been no issues whatsoever. We've not had
And
any
you're
problem.
proposing on using similar technology?
The same,
Okay,
yeah.
just doing our due diligence
No,
here.
it's a good question.
It's what, 800 kilowatts that triggers the best bylaw? I can't remember where we.
As I said, the wattage does not concern me, because I know this is probably going to be very small. But I would assume that the fire department would like to understand and know, just in the event that perchance there was some issue that required them to be,
Sure.
To intervene.
Yep, no problem.
God forbid.
And just procedurally, the fire department was put on notice pretty much shortly after receiving the application. All of the department heads in town received a copy of the application.
Very good. So they can present any kind of concerns that they have.
Yes.
Very good. Just to quickly follow up, and I apologize, I want to quickly. So what you're indicating here is that a particular cell tower, cellular operator, be it AT&T, be it, I know
Verizon,
Verizon,
T-Mobile,
whatever
yeah,
it is,
Dish Wireless.
they separately would have generators for
Correct.
their particular equipment.
Correct.
Okay, so in theory, you could have up to 5 backup generators that are in that location.
In theory, yes.
Okay. How is that managed?
So
No?
my reading of our bylaws is that the co-location actually requires a separate special permit.
Okay. So you
Again,
could-
that'd be something they would have to present to you.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they would have to present information on whether there would be any risk of noise or environmental impacts
Good.
in order to get those permits subsequently approved.
But that's beyond the scope of this special permit, so that's fine.
Yep.
And again, just a reminder, we're 700 feet, over 700 feet from Gardner Road, so that's a big distance for any.
But it's a wooded area.
It's a wooded area, yeah.
And we have had droughts.
Right. Additional questions from the board?
No.
All right, who here from the public is here for comments? Would anybody from the public like to comment? I mean, we have a few enough people, we'll give out 5-minute blocks. Up from the 3.
How generous.
All right, so if there
Think
is.
there, gentlemen.
Oh, would you like?
I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, please, go ahead. Identify yourself for the record first, though.
James Carpenter, I'm at 229 Gardner Road. We're not on the abutters list, but we're 2 houses from that, from the last abutter. And we've just had some concerns about this and interested in taking a look at what's proposed and what it consists of, that's all.
Okay. Yeah, if you have any questions, we're happy to get them out in the
I just might make a comment here that in that area, there's a lot of ledge, so when you start drilling, you're probably gonna hit it.
All right, any other public comments? All right.
We have people on the Zoom meet?
We don't, no, we do not. Okay, so moving down the list, there are a few things that jump out as issues here, and that we as a board don't necessarily have to vote on tonight, but we have to at least know if it is going to draw a strenuous objection from any members, so that we know we're not wasting time. The first one is lattice construction rather than monopole. And this is a place where our bylaw frankly contradicts itself. Because in one part of our bylaw, it says monopole construction only, and another part of our bylaw, it specifically references lattice. And it is on the town's project list to modernize our wireless bylaw, but that hasn't been done yet. And I'd also like to, remind the board that that is a waiver that we granted in the last application that came before us, for those reasons that came up. So if it makes sense to everybody procedurally, and I'm asking the applicants if you think this also makes sense to you procedurally, is there anybody on the board that has a strenuous objection to that, granting that waiver that they would like to discuss now? Or any questions about potentially granting that waiver down the road? Okay. So moving on to the next one, and the next one is probably the more complex one. So when you read the plain language of our bylaws, our zoning bylaws specifically, there's two ways to read it. When you read Article 4, the plain language, at least to me, and the applicant is arguing, pretty clearly states that a tower is allowable with a special permit within the residential district. And this is something that was briefly discussed at the last special permit for a tower, but was never actually raised as an issue for the applicant, and they never requested a waiver based upon this, which, if they did, probably would have made their life a lot easier, but they did not. Where this becomes more complicated than just a plain letter reading of our bylaws is that that we've proposed an amendment to our bylaw that will actually change the language in Article 4. And that language was proposed in order to, make our uses consistent with the Davis amendments. And just for the benefit of the public, the Davis amendments are laws that say you can't restrict certain things, those things being daycares and greenhouses. And while we were making those changes, we also said, we noticed that that was stated that way, so I think we can have a discussion about whether or not the new bylaw would prohibit it, but the new bylaw isn't passed. It could potentially pass at town meeting. It could potentially be interpreted to say that it's not an allowable use in that area. And if it was passed, the way the law works is it would be retroactively effective to the date of the town meeting vote, assuming it was approved by the Attorney General's office. And I know that seems weird because it has to get approved by the Attorney General's office, which could take months, many months. We have something that's still outstanding from last year, but if the Attorney General did approve that change, it would become effective as to when the vote happened. I would suggest that for the purpose of the applicant, we need to discuss now, to be fair, whether or not we would find a problem with granting a waiver for the use, given the ambiguity that's in our bylaw as it is now, which arguably the plain letter reading says you can do it, and that just to grant a margin of certainty to the applicant, that we would just want to stick a waiver in anyways, that even if we determine it is an allowable use under the plain language as the bylaw is written, we're going to want to put something in the special permit saying that in the case it's not an allowable use, we hereby grant a waiver for this use in this particular site. Now, this is something that I've researched pretty extensively because of what went on with the last special permit, and I know Mark's done some research on this too. Our Article 18, when it was written, listed a whole bunch of properties for the purpose of constructing towers, and those properties were all either owned by the town or owned by insiders, and you're not really supposed to do that way. So I think there's a good chance that if the applicant was to challenge the location standards in our Article 18, they would likely be successful. I also think it would be very unlikely that the select board would fund us even attempting to oppose that. They wouldn't fund an attorney for us to oppose that. So I think it would make everybody's life a lot easier if we were willing to consider granting that waiver. With that said, this is a board, we're here to discuss this as a group. And if anybody has any strong objection to potentially granting that waiver down the road, and fairness to the applicant, we need to get that out on the table now.
Spoken like an attorney.
Yeah.
Personally, I have no objection. If anything, I think there's some enormous amounts of benefits that come out of this here. I do also see the conflict, which does concern me because it has raised in the past some issues. You need to be aware of this here. And it brought it brought to this board significant issues. I mean, it is public record that this went to
Yes.
right? And so, you just need to be aware of it. We do understand and we do note that the bylaws as they're written, they're extremely confusing, contradictory. And as the chair has very clearly stated, there are issues with Article 18, which concerns us gravely because we do not want to adhere to a standard that is not only not enforceable, but it's probably illegal. So from that perspective. However, again, you need to go into this project with eyes wide open. And that's all I have to say.
No, I agree.
All right.
May I add something? Or, sorry, no.
Yes, well, let me just check and see if Mr. Russell has any
I'm
thoughts
okay.
on that. Okay.
I just wanted to add that despite our contention that it would be an allowed use under Article 4, we did evaluate compliance with all of Article 18. And so the location and the few other waivers that we're requesting were done by evaluating Article 18 and compliance with that to the best of our ability for the proposal.
I think it's also worth adding the determination that came back from our building commissioner. I don't think it's fair to categorize it as a denial. It was kind of a non-opinion. It was like Schrodinger's building determination. It was both an approval and a denial at the same time, but it essentially did kick the can down to us as elected officials to make a decision on this, which is probably more appropriate in the long run. So that's worth keeping in mind for this. But this is certainly the elephant in the room, so if anybody has any strong objections about this, this is a speak now kind of thing. So if no one does, we will move on to chain link fence rather than stockade. And this is a waiver we granted for the last tower that came through. Because it was far enough off the road, it was a similar situation, no one can see the equipment other than the folks that own the parcel. So, unless there's anybody who really thinks there's some kind of problem with that, I think that that's a reasonable waiver for us to grant again. So, if anybody has any objections, please throw them out now. All right, landscaping plan. This is kind of the same thing, because we require a landscaping plan. And can you give us a little background on your request for the waiver there? Was that a waiver you requested or one you said you needed?
I think it is a waiver request.
Okay.
To not provide a landscaping plan,
Yep.
and the reasoning behind that is the setback from the road and any residencies, and also the dense trees and vegetation that we would be looking to save as much of that as possible. So we're just looking to not provide a landscaping plan at this time.
Quick question on that. The height of the trees does not interfere because they would be substantially below, the tallest tree would be substantially below the area, not the area, but the height of where your transmission,
Antennas.
what transmission receivers are, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
So the trees we're talking about camouflaging is all the ground equipment, basically in the bottom half of the tower.
okay. So there's no need to top any trees or anything of that
Oh,
nature
no,
in the future?
no.
Okay.
All right, does anybody have any objections to granting a waiver on the landscaping plan? Okay. And then the next one is the 5-year special permit duration. Can you just tell us a little bit what you're asking for there?
So our main issue with that, 18.6.2.c.5, what requires that the height be evaluated and any height no longer justified being removed from the tower at those 5-year increments. And our issue is that as part of ITW's business plan, they establish long-term license agreements with the carriers, and then the carriers do their due diligence to, you know, agree to these license for a certain height on the tower. So if we were to have that height changed at any time, or at 5-year increments, that is going to deter a carrier potentially from signing an agreement to go on our tower.
Okay, so it sounded like you were talking about two different things there.
So there's that piece about the height being reevaluated. We would also like to not return every 5 years, but we understand that this board might require that we do that. We are required to do that in some towns. But we don't want the height to be reevaluated at that time, because we plan to have carriers at heights with long-term license agreements.
So is your objection not to the 5 years, but to the adjustment of the height, specifically within the special permit?
It's to both, but more so to the height evaluation at the time.
But you just said that you have towns where you have to go back every 5 years.
Yep,
to
we
the-
do, we do.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Okay.
just usually.
And that's not a bone of contention that you have, it's just an inconvenience?
It's just if the board would grant a waiver, we're asking at this time, because quite frankly, in those towns years ago, we didn't. And so the 5-year return is very much just a paper, show up and it's usually approved, but
We
we're
attended a
asking.
meet, just for example, we attended a meeting like this last year, Shana and I together, and they just said, why do we do this? This is foolish that they come back here every 5 years.
I get
What
it.
are we gonna do, make them
Yeah.
take the tower down? And it's just kinda like, well, we don't know why, it's part of what you require us to do, so we're just trying to avoid that.
So I think where we have a challenge there is that most of our special permits we actually issue as 3-year special permits. The idea of going to 5 seems reasonable to me. The adjusting the height of the tower, can we even legally do that? I guess under a home rule, but with the TCA, I think there might be an actual question there. So I think that is an easy waiver in my mind to grant, because I'm not even sure that that's legally enforceable. I don't know what other folks on the board feel like.
I would have no objection to just simply providing a waiver regarding the height very specifically.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable. You have to have a long-term business plan and can guarantee that your customers are going to be there, based on what you're planning on putting up. If I may just expand a little bit on the 5-year. We are fairly new into the tower area. The other thing, though, to keep in mind here is that we've had some bad experiences with other special permits. And so the revisiting of the 5 years is at least a check and balances that the town has on some of the other special permits. I can see how this is probably going to become a non-issue, and I would like to keep it there personally. And if in 5 years we decide that everything is running fine, and based on the experiences that we have, not only with your tower, but with the other tower that's coming into town, we can provide at that point in time, or the future boards can provide at that point in time, a notion that it doesn't have to be repeated. But at least sort of like the very first check mark. And again, please understand, this is not that we are against cell towers, it's just that it's a check and balances by the board to validate that the decision that we did at that point in time has been fully and correctly being implemented, and there's no other things that are happening that we did not necessarily anticipate. Okay?
Fair enough.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
No.
All right, so I think what you got out of that is that there's 2 folks on the board who would probably vote no to go longer than 5 years, but don't have any problem with the height, so. And I think that makes sense, because to Francois's point, one of the things that we have on our project list is modernizing our wireless communications bylaw. That's something that I anticipate we're actually gonna ask for DLTA funding for next year, to have an RPO come in and do it professionally for us. So I understand you'll be grandfathered in, but just from consistency's sake, I think the 5-year makes sense, because I think we'll have a completely different framework by then, so. Alright, so moving down the list, discussion of other issues of concern. FAA tower lighting requirements.
So typically, towers under 200 feet do not require lighting. It's not always a guarantee, though. We have to wait till we receive our FAA determination of no hazard from the FAA, and they're ultimately the ones that will determine if the tower needs to be lit. We have approximately in New England about 150 towers, and towers under 200 feet that are lit, we don't have any. So I can't guarantee you that the FAA is not going to require lighting, but it's probably unlikely. If it was to be required, your bylaw does mention to have shielding so the light cannot be seen from the ground, and we've done that for our other sites, and we would definitely, if you wanted to put that in some sort of order of conditions, we would abide by that.
Okay.
I have a question. Of the 150 towers that you have in New England, are any others nearby an airport within a mile?
Yes, yeah, we have several towers in like the town of Plymouth, Mass, that they're within a mile.
Okay.
At least one of them's within a mile, and in other areas, we do.
Okay, so anything else from the board on that one? So moving down the list, and this is another substantive one that I believe actually requires a waiver too. Balloon test. Now, our bylaw requires a 24-hour balloon test, which I don't think anybody makes sense to fly a balloon at night.
It's pretty hard.
I mean, to what end? But I can say that one of the criticisms that we received quite a bit of from the public with our last tower was that they felt we didn't do it in a way that was convenient enough for folks who were working. What do you propose for doing a balloon test? Is it possible to run earlier in the morning? What does the board support? Because from a factual standpoint, we had the previous testimony that we found convincing was that it's just windy in the afternoon.
Yeah,
So it's hard to fly a balloon going deep into the afternoon and then into the evening. So really, what do you propose for us to make this?
I think in our application, we proposed something like 8 to 2, but if the board would like to have it earlier than 8 o'clock, I mean, we could do it at 7, I mean, we could even do it at 6 if the board really wanted it super early. Typically, like you mentioned, the earlier you have that balloon up in the air in the morning, there's less winds, so it'll fly straight. As the day goes on, winds pick up, then it ends up starting to sway around and going sideways. So we would, if you want us to do it earlier, we would propose perhaps, 7 to noon or 6 to 11, something along those lines.
Yeah, I definitely think at least earlier makes sense. Where's the board at on this?
This was a huge thing last time.
It is.
And
Yeah.
people were really very vocal about how the bylaw's written. And it makes sense to fly it in the morning, but people were really, I don't know if you can, in that notification that goes out, mention like briefly why it happens like that. I mean, that's what stands out from the last one most for me, is that people were really use that as fuel.
What were the hours that they had flown, the previous one?
We ended up
It was
on
like-
8 to 12.
I think it was 8, or 2 maybe even. Maybe it was noon.
We have a lot of individuals who actually work very early. We have a lot of tradespeople here, and they do go up and down Route 68 a lot. So if these tradespeople are up at 6 a.m. in the morning, it would be fantastic if we can make sure that we can ensure that we can have a balloon test start as early as possible in the morning. And reasonably, I would say that probably until 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Thereafter, if you consider that the wind conditions are typically not conducive to having a good, successful balloon test, I would say present that as the rationale for why not to extend it beyond that. We definitely don't want to necessarily see a fluorescent balloon at night.
Yeah.
The idea of putting a bit of an explanation on the postcard that goes out, I like that. I think that might help with the public. Because one of the other artifacts in our Article 18 is that you have to notice everybody with the postcard mailing.
never seen a town that had that requirement before, you're the first in the
Yeah.
entire town.
And that was
It's-
a bone of contention because the last one was addressed incorrectly.
Yeah, it was addressed incorrectly and people weren't happy with how short it was. It was a big thing for us. Fortunately, we're a very small town, so it's actually very cheap and affordable to send a postcard to everybody in town. I think it ended up at, it was around $300.
Do you know how many residents there are in town?
It's roughly about, it's households, so you probably would be sending it to, either, first of all, the P.O. boxes and the addresses. If you check with the town of Hubbardston's mail, I think it's probably around 1,400.
Okay.
I'm kind of guessing right now.
Yeah.
But it's probably around that number.
So this could be something that just says current resident and to all the addresses in town, basically?
Yeah.
What you typically do is you bring it to the post office and they will make sure it gets to every
Okay.
single box
Okay.
out there. You don't even have to address it. I think
Yeah.
they can.
Well, we'll, and by we, I mean Mark will work with you, to make sure the notice is sufficient to what goes on with the bylaw, and then it needs to get sent out to everybody on a postcard. And yeah, I should have wrote down the number ahead of time, but it was surprisingly short money compared to what we thought it was gonna be. So I guess with that one, we should have the vote on the waiver now. That was how we handled it with the last application, so I do think we need to firm up the hours of the balloon test, and someone needs to make a motion, so.
Do you wanna take these all collectively, or wanna have each one individually at the end, once we go through every one of them?
Well, this is the only one that I think we really need that we need to even do the waiver for tonight. Because that's something that has to happen before the next time we meet about this. And we don't wanna be in a position where we have the applicant coming in and, we can't say, well, we debated this, discussed it thoroughly,
Sure.
we made efforts
So
for
do
the
we
town.
agree on the hours, say for example, 6 to 2?
I was thinking 6 o'clock, but we have to get there a good, half hour before to set up and everything, so it could be pitch black when we get into the woods to do it, so.
Well, you're planning on doing it soon, shortly.
Yeah, hopefully within the next month.
By 5 AM, by 4:30 AM, you start seeing already.
Yeah,
We have a lot of longer days here, yeah.
so we're also coming from about 2 hours away. Could we do 6:30? Is that fair?
You tell us,
Yeah,
what's
if
your
we could
proposal
do
here?
6:30 to 1:30?
In the air at 6:30.
In the air at 6:30, yeah.
Is the 1:30 sufficient, or do you wanna extend it to 2?
I don't know that it makes a difference in the afternoon, I think it's in the morning where it
It's in the
really makes the
morning?
difference for people,
Okay,
because.
so your proposal is to have it from 6:30 to 1:30 in the afternoon. So that gives us a total of 7 hours,
Right.
correct? I think it's reasonable.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion that we grant a waiver from the 24-hour balloon test requirement to instead require a balloon test from 6:30 to, what was it, 1:30 we said?
1:30, so 7-hour period.
Right, so we need that motion.
I'll make that motion, that we issue a waiver for the 24-hour balloon test. Instead, allow it to occur from 6:30 AM to 1:30 PM.
And I would second that motion.
All right, here in a first and a second, any further discussion? Calling a vote.
Steiger, aye?
DAC aye.
Russell, aye.
Monroe, aye. All right, so, we will need you to schedule that. And, please keep Mark in the loop. Ideally, we have that before the next meeting, and picking the date of the next meeting is gonna be a little further down the list.
Do you
So-
plan on having, I do know the previous tower, they have people out there doing photographs at different locations?
Yep.
Okay.
If the town has certain location they'd like us to check, we'd be happy to do that. If you have a.
We will have locations for you.
Okay.
That's something that can come from our office, and that's also something that usually comes from Mr. Murray, who I don't believe is able to make it tonight, obviously, cause he's not here. Okay.
So could that come offline? Or would we need, that can come in between now and the next
Yeah,
hearing?
please work with the office to get that, yeah.
So you're not looking for a date tonight, you're looking for us to just work with, is it Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless
Right.
there's anybody who's particularly passionate about specifying a specific date for it.
No, I think one thing to keep in mind is
Weekday.
you need to keep in mind weather conditions also.
Yeah.
So you probably have a date in mind and a alternate date.
Yeah. So we're really gonna be pushing the envelope. The next meeting is June 22nd, and we have to have an advertisement and notify everybody, and the advertisement is gotta be 14 days before the balloon testing?
Well, we're gonna talk about the scheduling a little bit later, because I might not be able to do the 22nd myself. I think we might need to pick a different night.
Okay.
I mistakenly proposed that date without checking to make sure that I didn't buy concert tickets for my wife for my anniversary, so.
Anyone good?
Wait, don't tell me.
Great show.
Yeah, Tanglewood. So, moving down the list. Provisions for power outages. Now, this is something that is pretty important in town, because, and I guess you already addressed this a bit, because the carriers are gonna be looking at this individually. We obviously don't have a lot of cell service, and folks are transitioning to wireless phones. So from an emergency preparedness standpoint, redundant communication and the towers or the equipment being able to function as long as possible is important to the town from an emergency preparedness point. And I don't know if the fire chief or the police chief is gonna have an official comment that comes in on that, but it's something that we do like to hear about, and is important that it is as long as is possible for us, because there's areas of the town that also frequently lose power, and when they do lose power, about the only way somebody can call for emergency services is to leave their house and hike a quarter mile some direction up a hill in order to try to call. Even here, in this meeting room and in the senior center, if you want me to make an emergency call because the power and the internet's out, you gotta hike out to the road. So, it is a big issue for us from an emergency preparedness point. So it is, to the degree you already talked about it, it's something that we're certainly gonna wanna talk about more, because it is a big issue to us, because we don't have other backups.
I guess one of the distinctions I think I'd like to get some more information on is your battery backup, what does that do versus what do the carriers do?
So-
And I don't necessarily need an answer to this tonight,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is I need you to be prepared to answer that. And more importantly is that, say for example, your carrier can provide 12 hours or 15 hours or 24 hours or even more.
It's more.
And yours is only available for 7 hours. What happens, right? And again, I don't wanna belabor this here because we probably wanna get out of here too. But more importantly is for you to come back with some form of a prepared
Sure.
statement as to how that works.
Sure.
Okay?
And as to the form of the performance bond, we did grant a waiver on this on the previous tower after great deliberation. I imagine what we'll be looking to do will be similar to what we did there, where, I believe in the bylaw, it actually specifies a cash bond.
Yeah.
But we ended up just requiring a bond with what we deemed to be adequate protection. I'm drawing a blank off the top of my head what the requirements were.
I could give you an example of one that we've done with
Yeah.
the town. So this is a bond that we did with Ringe, New Hampshire, for a similar style tower.
Yeah, I would refer you to the previous permit that we granted, because there was great deliberation and thought that went into the compromise that we ended up coming to there to move off of the cash bond, and believe it or not, that was actually something that got a ton of public feedback on, of all things that came up in the process. Mostly because there was a lot of concern about there being abandoned towers.
Yeah.
And that one was also in a highly visible downtown location. But
Just to say from our side of things, literally investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into projects like this. And for us to ever walk away and abandon it, we would never do that. I mean, I know it's my word and you like to have something to back that up, but there's absolutely no way we've ever abandoned any tower that we've ever built and constructed, and we certainly wouldn't plan on doing it here.
Okay. Just wanna make you aware that it's something that the public was very passionate about, and that there was a lot of debate about. Anybody else on the board have anything on that issue? I'm sure there'll be more discussion about it down the road. Discussion of initial application review costs, further technical assistance. So we use Places Associates for doing our technical reviews. I believe we sent over, we sent over what the estimate for the review is. That's the estimate for the first phase of the work, so it's doing the detailed review, looking at all the plans, reporting to us, going to the meeting, watching this meeting on tape. And the other things that are outlined in the document there. Now there is a finishing, a drafting and finishing phase. We can have you work with Places Associates to determine what an estimate for that is, and we can talk about that, but there obviously are fees that are associated with these things. And the town has a 15% markup on those as an administrative fee. So, are there any questions about that we can answer without Bill here to talk about it?
Where's Places Associates out of?
Their office is out of Littleton? Yeah.
Littleton?
Yeah.
And that 15%, what exactly is that for?
That is the administrative fee for the office staff that works on it. It pays for Mark.
He does a lot of reviews.
That's one thing we've never had to pay for in any other town, is an administrative fee for a consultant for the town to
We
deal
get
with the consultant.
a $0 budget from the town as a planning board,
Yeah.
which is, in my mind, absolutely bonkers, and it's something that I'm working to change. But that is unfortunately a problem that the select board needs to address.
Don't look at me. My pockets are empty.
But we're happy you're here to listen and hear our
Yeah.
gripes.
So, we'll get everything we can to you ahead of time on that, and Mark and Bill will work with you on getting that all fleshed out so that we can know what everybody is potentially on looking for here.
So you think you'll have a report for before the next meeting that we can review and?
So the work that Places has currently proposed is a review and then a report, and working with you to try to resolve any of the issues that come up on their report before we get to the next meeting, so that we hopefully get to the next meeting and they recommend all the things that are specified in the invoice, which is the review for compliance, review of the plans, review of those things. And hopefully they come back to the next meeting and say, yep, all of these things are all set here. Then we just need to draft a special permit and approve it.
Is there any manner in which we handle paying the consultant directly, or it has to go through the town with the administrative fee? I know I believe we gave the town a check for $1,000 to open that account, and that is what's used to pay the consultant, is that correct, or?
If that balance is beefed up, it'll
Okay.
be used to pay the
Yeah.
consultant. Right now, it's going to advertising fees and certified mail and
Okay.
application fee.
You will get an itemization of the actual costs that were incurred. So it does not go into a black box where you don't get any information back on this here. I did want to indicate though, and this is very important, one thing we have learned with the special permits, and I mean, granted we have a very experienced person here, Mark, who's been instrumental in assisting this planning board now with a lot of these special permits, and he's taken off the burden from some of the professional services, which are much higher costs. And so, I'm not trying to justify the 15%, but yes, I'm justifying the 15%. The 15%, 1.5, yes, not the 15, 1.5%.
Yeah.
So, he does a lot of the bookkeeping, he does a lot of the, issues with regards to scheduling, he will provide you with services such as advice and things of that nature. That's really the value that comes out of that.
No advice.
Yeah, no advice. No.
Well, no, advice in terms of, like, for example, information that you may, where to get information and things of that nature.
Direction.
Yeah.
Directions. That's the
Procedural.
plan- Procedural directions, yes.
Okay.
Advice is 50%.
And a secret handshake.
Yeah.
But no.
Well, considering the last time we went through this, we had nobody in the office.
Yeah.
And, we had nobody in the office, and that was a traumatic summer for me last year, and I'm not willing to repeat that. All right, so the next thing we need to talk about is scheduling.
Continuation.
Yes, so we also need to talk about scheduling for our next meeting, because we need to talk about scheduling for our next two meetings. The first one, I think we already settled on, which is June 7th. So I think we're all good on that one.
One thereafter would be, our typical Thursday, but you're saying the 6:22 you cannot make, right?
Well, so what our typical meeting would be would actually be the following week. So, it would be the third, we do first Wednesday, third Thursday. So the first Wednesday is on the 7th, because it's a weird shaped month, and then the third Thursday is on the 15th. Which I guess we could do, so we'd be looking at either the 15th or the 29th.
Well, the preparation for the balloon test is going to be critical for you.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be happy by the 15th.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna need to continue to a date certain tonight.
Yeah.
You can take two approaches. You can either be really optimistic and continue it to something in the third week of June, or you can be safer and continue it to the first meeting in July. But, you know, if you continue to the earlier date and we're just not ready yet with balloon test results, you can just open it up to continue it again.
I just caution the board that the first week in July obviously is, sometimes people do take time off.
Yeah.
Because it's the 4th of July weekend.
It would be the 5th of July. so
Exactly,
that's-
would be right after the 4th of July.
That tends to be challenging from a scheduling standpoint.
Precisely, and so, I mean, would we entertain having a meeting on the 29th?
I mean, I think that would actually make sense. So, if we had a meeting on the 29th, we would just skip the first meeting of July.
What's your,
Fine by me.
Check with my boss.
sorry, when are the town elections due? It's coming up in
So
June,
the
right?
Tuesday following that.
It's the 13th.
The 13th.
The 13th of June? I think we need to be very also cognizant of the fact that things may change here.
That's true. The folks are running uncontested.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any colossal write-in campaign, but stuff happens.
And I'm going to look at you for a minute here. Your term ends when this election, can I safely assume that you would be still considering to, okay.
And Mr. Holman, who couldn't make it this evening, will have to have him watch the videotape and then report in writing under the Mullins rule. And then that would have another member that's available.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we just need to make absolute certain that he can make the 29th. So at a minimum, we just need a quorum of us to be able to make the 29th. And because we can continue from there.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we can't get into a situation where we drop another potential eligible vote, cause we gotta have the 4.
And we have 2 individuals who are going to be part of the election. One is Bill and the other one is Stack.
Yep, and we have 1 member who has recused himself from this, so.
Correct, so we're.
need everybody we have.
Okay.
Okay, so how does the 29th sound to you guys?
Does that work? You're going, you're on it. We can make that work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that gives you enough time to prepare for the balloon test, which is really the critical component.
As long as we don't have inclement weather, like when we plan the dates, you know, then we'd have to reschedule.
That's why I again suggested you have a primary date and a fallback date.
Right, sometimes it rains on both dates though, so, but as long as we don't have anything like that, it should be enough time, yeah.
Yep.
Alright, so then, in that case, we need a motion to continue the public hearing to 6:30 PM on Thursday, June 29th at, yeah, I said 6:30.
Yep. So I'd like to make the motion that we continue this meeting of the special permit.
Public hearing.
I'm sorry, public hearing to the 29th of June at 6:30 here at probably at this location.
Hearing first, do we have a second? Hearing a first and a second, any discussion? Let's call a vote.
Steiger, aye?
Dak, aye.
Russell, aye.
Monroe, aye. So we have continued the public meeting.
I didn't know, and I apologize, after you're the only public that we have here, apart from you. Now that you've.
Thanks. Not that Katie doesn't count.
Because she's
I
part
mean,
of the
but we
select
don't
board.
get budget.
And doesn't, and wants to fund and hopefully fund our, fund this here. Is there, I guess, do you wanna ask them if they have any kind of, questions or comments now that they've listened and heard
Yeah,
a
yes,
little bit more?
even though we've closed the public hearing, I'm
Yeah.
happy to recognize you if there is anything you want to speak to.
No, we're just curious to see
Okay.
what was going on and how this is gonna transpire and what the towers are actually gonna produce.
Okay.
It's so close to us.
Yeah,
Okay.
whether we'll be able to see it or not, I don't know. Depends.
Just for discussion point at the next meeting, can you just give us the dimensional lines to the surrounding properties?
Yep. To the property lines or to the homes themselves?
To the homes themselves.
Okay.
It should be pretty easy for you to set out. I don't know if there's any applications getting any, but that's helpful for us for a discussion point, and I think it'd be helpful for these folks.
I do have a suggestion.
Yep.
That last time there was the balloon test, the way that they got around the inclement weather was, it was the date and then the next day and sequentially until there's a date that could be a balloon test. So in other words, the second date was the next day. If that date was still shitty, it would be whatever the next day is. You're welcome. You're welcome, Auntie. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that was the way it was written, so just suggestion, so that way you don't get boxed in on 2 dates that you can't do.
Okay, that's a good point.
Alright, so the public meeting, public hearing is continued. So we don't need an agreement. Do we need an agreement in writing for that? I think we just vote on that.
No,
No.
We agree verbally.
yeah.
Verbally, thank you.
Yeah.
Speaking to the camera, the microphone. Thank you very much for coming and
Thank you.
thanks for
Thank you.
being here to provide us with all of this information. Is this ours or is that theirs?
It's ours.
Okay, good, thank you.
Alright, so moving down the list, we have some administrative matters. We have approval of advertising invoices. Which, which I guess Nate's paying with magic because we don't have a budget, but.
Well,
Thank you.
somebody's gotta approve the payment, and then Nate will figure out what account it's gonna come out of.
Yeah.
Good night, thank you.
Thank you.
But-
Good night.
But these are the advertising costs for the 2 zoning articles.
Alright, what's the amounts on this? Can you just give us the quick breakdown? And for the public.
The general bylaw amendments were lengthier, and those were $431.32. The solar bylaw advertisement was shorter and is $194.62.
Any questions about those?
For a total
So-
of $625.94.
I apologize for the confusion here on my end. I'm seeing there's a $194.60, there's what appear to be either invoices or bills. One for $194.62, right? Is that the one for the solar?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I see another one which is $226.18, right?
Oh, that's a different story. There's a.
Because there was a balance
There's
forward.
there's an unapplied payment there, which is an error. The real cost was further up on the page, $431.32. The 205.14 credit is actually going back to the DPW. They had overpaid the last invoice for a scenic road
Okay, so it does not
application.
apply to us.
It does not apply
Gotcha.
to you.
Very
Yeah.
good. So they're looking at it from the town of Hubbardston, but it was from the planning board. It was not for the planning board then.
Right.
Gotcha, okay. So again, the total amount is for how much?
$625.94.
$625.94. So you need a motion for approving
Yes.
payment of the
Two
invoices.
invoices, as stated, totaling $624, what was it?
$625.44.
Oh, yeah.
Have that?
Oh, well, that's even better.
All right. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the payment of two invoice for vendor Local Q in the amount of $625.94.
You're in a first, how about a second?
I'll second.
You're in a first and a second, any further discussion?
Do I get to vote on these types of administrative matters?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay.
Calling a vote?
Steiger, aye?
Dak eye.
Monroe, aye.
We're here for special permits and public hearing. That's where
Fine.
you come in.
Always welcome for discussion, though.
I knew I wasn't
Yeah.
on material, applications for the A and Rs as an example.
Correct.
But my
Everybody
question
needs
was
to sign this
specific
as
to
well.
administrative.
Yeah,
votes.
everybody.
not from a voting perspective.
Okay, I got the answer.
All right, proposed solar bylaw, legal review discussion. So,
Both of these here that we need to sign?
just the top one.
No, just top.
So we submitted the solar bylaw review to town council, and town council came back with some feedback. The select board on Monday night approved the warrant, so if we're making any changes, we're gonna have to make them on the town floor. And we also would need to, we would want to vote tonight to say that we also support those changes. So let me get to them in the document. So, we're just gonna look at what Carolyn's comments were. Although all of the comments are showing up with the same author on this for me.
It's page 8 starts the zoning articles.
You said page 8?
It's just the solar though, isn't it? So isn't that?
No, the document I put in here is our comments on the entire warrant.
Okay, but we were only focusing on the solar?
Oh,
or are we
There's
looking at all of them?
there's one thing I think you should think about in the general bylaw. Where'd it go? Okay, page 14.
Okay.
Down at the bottom of the page under roads. She has a comment on the language there that this would be a little messier to present in a floor motion than some of the others under solar, but if you're concerned about it, you could think about presenting a motion here.
Personally, I think we skip this one and let it ride, and if we feel, because she's ultimately, so she's saying by referring to the planning board rules and regs dated February 1st, 2000, the zoning bylaw will need to be amended each time the rules and regs are updated. Instead, I suggest replacing February 1st with in effect on the date the application is filed. Well, the regs haven't been updated in 23 years. We are planning on hopefully trying to modernize them at some point in the near future, but this hasn't been a problem for 23 years. And we'll put a note in the file that when somebody gets around to updating the regs that they're gonna need to also fix that. So I think it's just gonna be confusing to the public if we try doing too much with floor amendments.
Yeah.
So I would recommend skipping it unless anybody felt otherwise.
Nope, that's fine.
Alright, so solar starts on page 16.
Alright, so which ones are hers?
So building inspector become building commissioner?
Those are our edits.
Yeah, so
Oh, okay.
It's only the comments that you need to pay attention to.
So her first criticism was, I'm aware that the Attorney General has approved minimum lot size for large-scale solar array of 3 acres. Hopkinton and 8 acres Dayton, so I anticipate a minimum of 5 acres would be approved. However, the AG may caution how many 5-acre parcels are available for solar arrays, as zoning bylaws cannot be unreasonably restrictive. And then it cites a case. So this is a place where
But
we
this
got.
is for commercial though, right? Versus,
Yeah, this is
are the
large-
cases that
large
she's
scale.
citing, are they also for commercial?
Presumably, at 3
Yeah.
acres and 8 acres.
Well, actually, yeah, large-scale solar. So, they might ask for an explanation on this, and from a factual standpoint, the undeveloped land is in lots of 5 acres or larger in this town for the most part. It's only smaller than 5 acres if it's been subdivided to build into 2-acre house lots. So I don't think there's really an option for somebody to even develop a smaller than 5-acre parcel as a solar field. Like, I think that just from a factual standpoint, it works for us, but it's worth talking about. Does anybody feel like we should change it and reduce the size?
Nope.
No.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that folks were pretty passionate about too. So scrolling down. The Attorney General will likely strike the last sentence prohibiting the use of pesticides and herbicides as preempted by state law.
Where are you? I'm sorry, what page?
20.
Bottom of
No,
page
19.
20.
No, 20.
Is it? I mean, I'm not reinstate if they strike it, but the last two applicants did agree to it as a condition. And she didn't say that they would strike all of the changes, they would just strike potentially that change. So I guess, do we wanna take the risk, do we wanna remove that as a floor amendment?
In my opinion, we should just leave it, and, and see if the Attorney General comes back with anything here.
Any other thoughts on it?
I think presenting this here on the floor is just gonna open up a can of worms too.
Well, I also think it's gonna be tough to send me out there in front of the townsfolk and say,
Oh, yeah.
I think we should have some pesticides and herbicides added back to our bylaw. Because
Well,
some folks
that's
in
exactly
Boston
where I
think
was
so.
going with this
Yeah.
here, so that's why. I
That's gonna be an
think-
awkward conversation.
Let the Attorney General come back and provide their rationale. At that point in time, we can.
Okay. Anybody feel differently? Okay, so next one being same comment as above. Minimum lot size, we already talked about that. The next one was she didn't like, there should be no illumination without personnel on the site because she thought it was confusing. I don't know that I agree with that.
So which one are we talking about now? What section is this?
It is 20.3.9 design standards. We added shall comply with international dark sky standards,
Yeah.
fixture seal of approval, and then there shall be no illumination without personnel on the site, which just means if there aren't people working there, they shouldn't have the lights on.
Yeah.
Cause I don't know that that's something that the Attorney General would even be interested in. What else did she have?
Might be it.
I think she commented on the setbacks, that they might have an issue with the setbacks, but, she didn't have a specific recommendation on what they wouldn't have an issue with. So we had increased the front yard setback to 100 feet, 75 feet for the side yard and 75 feet for the rear yard. And on a 5-acre parcel, so a 5-acre parcel is essentially, I'm just making sure we didn't constructively prohibit it through the setbacks. Cause we did with the marijuana facilities, and that was kind of the problem. Cause with the setbacks that we had applied, if you applied it to a 5-acre parcel, unless it was a perfect square, it wasn't possible. I'm looking at you because you think maps.
No, I mean, these setbacks don't constitute any
Okay.
problem on a 5-acre site.
Okay, so does anybody else feel we should do a floor amendment to those?
No.
And that was it for concerns, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Alright, so it sounds like it is the will of the board to let it ride and then deal with whatever the Attorney General pushes back on. Sounds good to me. Alright, so moving down the list, master plan, status update, land use and open space chapters. Nate's been working on that with MRPC. Just as a matter of background, we've been working on updating our master plan since 2017, before I think any of us were on the board. And there's been some delays working with MRPC. Some of those have been on us because of all the turnover in the town, but it's still an ongoing project, but it is very close to being closed out. The facilities plan is holding it up. So Nate is working with Karen and some other, and Jonathan on that.
yeah, let me read off, you didn't get this, Nate sent out an inquiry to Jonathan
Okay.
this morning, and Jonathan came back with
Yes, please.
something of a response. Thanks for reaching out and apologies for not getting back to you sooner. I'll be sending several chapters out to review shortly that especially will need feedback on updates regarding goals and actions to make sure that they reflect the most current state of Hubbardston. I believe the planning board has the implementation draft from the prior DLTA effort. I don't know if you do or not. I haven't seen such a document. If there has been any distribution of the implementation draft to other boards and committees in town, it would be helpful to have any changes provided since then.
We did have it, and we do have the old implementation draft somewhere. That was when Dan was starting the all chairs meeting, and it was gonna get distributed through that, and then Dan left. And I think it got sent out to some of the other department heads, but that's where you run into that turnover issue, because I can't remember if it was Sandy or Ryan or help me out here, it's late. David, there we go. David Nixon. That was here during that time period because they were the one who was supposed to take that around for everybody. So I think we'll have to help Nate with some research and find out where that died on our side. Any questions or thoughts on that? And just to add to that, because it is an MRPC related thing, I've actually been nominated for the executive committee for MRPC. There's gonna be a vote in June where I hopefully will be elected to it. So that should be helping us firm up our relationship with them.
Great.
And help us better identify grant opportunities and such down the road as we participate more with them.
Fantastic.
And I guess as a matter of background, for the public, the town sends 2 representatives to our regional planning organization, MRPC. One of the representatives has to be somebody from the planning board, and the person from the planning board is me. The other person can be another person, really anybody. Some towns do the select board member, some towns just do other interested folks. We chose to send Mark as the alternate. And that's actually the commission that makes up the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission. So moving down the list, agro-tourism, eco-tourism bylaw. That's moving along. We actually just had a meeting of that ad hoc committee not too long ago, and we worked through a draft that actually Mark had put together before he was just a volunteer. And the gentleman who's working on it with us had some really good questions and had some good thoughts about how to address some of the issues that we had. So he was clearly following along, and he is due to send us over a draft of that bylaw update for June 9th, was it? Sometime early in June, he's supposed to send it over to us. And the hope is that we can get that out to all of the department heads, out to the Agricultural Commission, out to the farms, out to the EDC, really anyone. Anyone who's a potential stakeholder on that, and hold a public information session for folks to come in and talk about it and learn about it while it's still in the subcommittee, so that we know if it's gonna be passable in town. But I'm excited that that's moving and where it's going, and it is the biggest shift in public policy for the town of Hubbardston of the last 10 years. It is a small issue that is a big deal. It's really gonna be a big thing, and hopefully people are gonna like it. It's been hugely impactful. Similar bylaws have been hugely impactful in some of our surrounding towns. they're really making a pretty big difference.
Good.
So, matters not reasonably anticipated by a chair. Anybody have any of them?
I have a question,
Mhm.
or maybe just some clarification. The Affordable Housing Committee, at one point, there was talk about me taking over where Alice was representative for that. Is that official, or? I know there hasn't been a meeting, but.
That's true, we need to appoint somebody. I know Katie is also on that.
Super fun committee.
It looked like it was.
It was, it's good
Okay.
stuff. All the committees are fun, I suggest more people volunteer.
It certainly needs a hand from the planning board.
It interests me a great deal, so I would be willing to do that.
I very much think that, I would like to nominate, Erica Dack as our representative to the Affordable Housing Committee.
Okay with it?
Yes, yes.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Here in a first and a second, any discussion? Calling a vote?
You wanna approve it for yourself?
I approve myself.
Uh, Steiger, aye?
Monroe, aye. Yeah,
I'll make
well-
sure that we get a nod from before you can nominate her. She's gonna be very upset at us.
And, once, assuming you continue on into the next year, there are a lot of places where planning board members are assigned because of our importance in setting public policy for the town. And historically, we have included our associate member in that, so if you are interested in any of those other organizations, there is a whole list of them. There is the Affordable Housing Committee, there's a couple different committees that meet at MRPC. For most of them, the role of our representative is to sit there and listen, and if something crazy is going on, be like, hey guys, I don't think this is a good idea. Or in the context of MRPC, recognize something as an opportunity for the town to get grant money. That's really the most important thing to come out of our interaction with them and with some of the state organizations. So, once you get into your next cycle, assuming that's something interesting to you, we'll go through and we'll take a look at the list again.
Okay.
All right, any other matters not reasonably anticipated?
It's more sort of a question now that we have Katie here, the representative from the select board. I'm gonna take advantage of this here. And it's a zoning issue. The reason I'm bringing it up is where do we stand on 248 Gardner Road? Is that still
There
moving?
was a meeting.
Okay, I if it can be discussed.
There was a meeting. We didn't put it on the agenda because we had such a full,
Mhm.
a full agenda for the evening. There was a meeting. I attended it. Mark, you attended it, right? That's good because I'm gonna ask you to recap it. Along with Kathy and Nate and Duffy. And we talked about a coordinated approach for moving forward with it. There isn't really a role for the planning board from an enforcement standpoint on that, because it's ultimately the responsibility of the building commissioner and the board of health to enforce on our behalf.
Okay, but understanding that it is a zoning issue too, because it's not a commercially zoned area, and what appears to be conducting commercial activities there.
Yep, our powers are entirely delegated to the CEO on that, who is our building commissioner.
Could I get
So-
enlightened on what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So 248 Gardner Road has come up from time to time. It is the property on Route 68 that is essentially across the street from this.
From where the tower is,
Yeah.
this tower, Tiny Tots and.
Across the street.
Yep, across the street from them.
Yep. There's been complaints over the years that there's been folks living there in campers. There's been
On
complaints.
this property?
No, across the street from
Across
it.
the street.
Yeah.
At 248.
Okay.
Yep, there's been complaints.
That's the east side of 68.
Yep.
Correct.
Complaints of them running an illegal junkyard. At one point, we had it on our agenda and we talked about it and we got a Google Map photo. that showed that there were almost 40 cars in various states of disassembly that were on the property, and our bylaw does not allow that if you're not an authorized dealer.
Okay.
And ultimately, the enforcement for that falls on the select board for the car dealer license. But yeah, it did appear that there were multiple businesses running out of there. The issue got pushed to our building commissioner at the time, who was actually contracted from the city of Gardner. And the contract was not written in a way where the town of Hubbardston actually paid for enforcement actions. So it didn't contemplate enforcement, so there was pretty much nothing we could do about it. Now that we have our own internal building commissioner, we have more options that are available to us, and our building commissioner and Board of Health are currently looking into that property to determine what possible remedies the town might have for it.
Okay, thank you.
That also answer your question, Francois?
I guess it does. I mean, so we're still looking at a timeline that is some form of enforcement
Still
happening.
moving forward,
Yeah,
Okay,
it's,
good. That's good to know,
yes.
because we brought it up originally, I think it was back in 2021.
Oh, it was brought up before that to me. One of the abutters happens to be a relative. And I was brought up because the dumpster was on their property along with all the junk and everything else on their property, breaking through stone walls and such.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to go into details, but appreciate the fact that this is actually being addressed, because it appears that there still is that level of activity happening at that location.
there's an active case open with the town,
Great, thank you.
with the right folks this time.
Wonderful, I'm glad to hear that.
Right, any other matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair? Any additional public comments? Anybody online?
Never was.
Gotta check.
Tens and tens of views.
I mean, usually special permit hearings
I
are really
know,
well
I'm
attended.
surprised. I know it's down on 68, but
Yeah.
even still.
So, with that said, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to put forth a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Here in a first, do we have a second?
I will second that.
Here in a first and a second, it is not debatable.
Dyer, aye?
Dak, aye.
Monroe, aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank everybody for coming.